Hi guys, it's Akin from the Fiddle Fig Plant Resource Center. Thank you so much for joining me. Please subscribe to our channel and ask any questions that you have below. And check out our Facebook groups where you can post pictures of your fiddly figs and ask questions. So today I want to talk about an interesting question that I get, and that is, can you make rooting hormone to propagate your fiddly fig at home? And so it's a great question, and I'll go over all the basics today. If you're interested in propagation, I have a huge, extensive fiddly fig propagation video that tells you everything you need to know. So check that out. I will link it below. And rooting hormone in general, I'll kind of talk about what it is, why you need it, and everything that goes into it today. We do make a rooting hormone for fiddly figs, and so I'll link that below. It's called Propagation Promoter. And so talking about rooting hormone in general, what it is it is a naturally occurring substance in the plant that tells your plant to grow roots and to put its energy and its cells into growing roots. And so it's something called an auxin that is naturally occurring in all plants. And so as plants are growing, they have stem cells that kind of don't know what cells they're going to become, and they'll either become roots or shoots. But the rooting hormone, or the auxin, tells them to become roots. So when you're doing propagation, you're making a cut in a fiddly fig to propagate it and put it into water so it'll grow into a new plant. What you want is you want all of that plant's energy to go into producing roots, because your plant only has a limited time that it will survive without new roots. And so you need the roots to grow so that you can plant it into a new pot with soil and it becomes a new plant. And so rooting hormone accomplishes that. It increases the number of roots that your cutting will produce. It increases the uniformity of the roots. You want to have, at least 6 to 12 roots of at least 1 to 2 inches long before you replant it. And so it cuts down the time to your cutting producing new roots, and it increases your chances of success of your cutting. And so it's important to use a rooting hormone when you're doing propagation so that your plant will propagate successfully without kind of running out of time and running out of nutrients. And so that's why you would use a rooting hormone. But can you do a DIY rooting hormone? So if you Google it, there's a lot of, unfortunately, kind of false information out there about creating rooting hormones at home. And unfortunately, they don't work. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but I'll go through kind of each of them and why they don't work. So the top one I see is aspirin. And so there's been a lot of studies and data on this. Unfortunately, aspirin does not work. It's not a rooting hormone. It is not a plant auxin. It doesn't create new roots in your plant. And so aspirin is one of them, but they've tested it. It doesn't work. Another one that people say maybe works is honey. And so what's interesting about honey is that not only is it a plant-like substance? So I think people think maybe it contains auxins because it comes from a plant. No, it turns out that it doesn't contain any auxins. What it does contain are some antimicrobial properties. And I think what you'll see over and over with these kind of DIY rooting hormones is that they actually are antimicrobials. And we know, if you've watched my propagation video, you know that the most common cause of failure of propagation, especially in fiddly figs, is that you put your cutting into a container and you get either a bacterial or a fungal infection, and it kills your cutting and your cutting doesn't root. So you have to ask yourself, are you looking for a rooting hormone or an antimicrobial? You actually need both. And so the thing that causes rooting hormones to be successful is they contain these plant auxins that tell your plant to grow roots. But they also, most of them, and ours does especially, contains antifungal and antibacterial properties. And so all of these DIY rooting hormones that you see are actually just antimicrobials. So honey is one of them. Another one of them is cinnamon. So cinnamon, as you know, is, you probably know that it's kind of an anti-inflammatory and also an antimicrobial. And so it can cause sort of a disinfecting process if you put it into water. So honey, cinnamon, those are all of the good ones that are kind of antimicrobial. Another one that people use is hydrogen peroxide. And so unfortunately, this doesn't contain any plant auxins, and so it won't actually act as a rooting hormone. But it is the one that I would say that you could try. So we do see a lot of plant cuttings fail because of contamination of fungus or bacteria. So before you do your cutting, before you put your cutting into water, you could just pour a little hydrogen peroxide, and that will basically sterilize your cutting before you put it into clean water, which will give it a better chance of success. So I actually say kind of maybe on that one because it is an effective antimicrobial. And so I wouldn't try honey, I wouldn't try aspirin, I wouldn't try cinnamon. I know for sure they don't work, but the hydrogen peroxide isn't a bad idea to treat your cutting before you put it into water. And then what you'll want to do is use a tried and true rooting hormone, which are these plant-derived auxins that are proven to tell your plant to put out new roots. And our propagation promoter contains a bunch of different plant hormones that work really well for fiddle leaf figs especially. And so it is really phenomenal in getting your fiddle leaf fig cutting to root. And also it creates this gel barrier around your cutting to protect it from fungus and bacterial. So that's a good option to kind of do the 2-in-1 there and give yourself the best chances of success when it comes to doing propagation. So I will link it below. I'll link all my other videos on, propagation and different strategies there. And let me know in the comments if you have any questions about rooting hormones. I'd be happy to answer them. Thanks for watching and happy growing.